But people love to stick their neck into like hornets' nests.
I have a problem with Nick Rekieta, and the specific thing I have a problem with was contained in one of his videos on Rumble titled Darrell Brooks Convicted Because of Racism, Cruz Sentencing Fireworks and COVID Amnesty for Tyrants. I will try to remember to post a link below the video. The video went out on November the 1st, 2022. And it's a bit late because the videos are kind of piling up. I've got a noxious video to cover from the Young Turks on Tim Pool and the Q nightclub, a Vorsh Destiny debate to do, She-Hulk to finish. It's endless. Mr. Rekieta has been posting a lot on Rumble since his ban and reinstatement on YouTube. If you don't know Nick Rekieta, he is, according to him, a trained lawyer turned YouTuber who gained a big following covering legal cases like the Rittenhouse trial, and he seems to provide plenty of entertainment to his audience. The problem for me with him is when he gets drunk, which seems to be most of his streams now, and he starts talking about things that are not the law, because that's what he did in this stream. He gets onto science. And I'm going to have to hedge what I say here very carefully, because what he had to say on Rumble, if I just play a clip of it, I think I'd get banned from YouTube. Yes, it's that bad. I'll have to phrase it in the form of a negative. I'll just say that I can't find any evidence that the COVID mRNA vaccines alter human DNA. But Nick did not take this position. Nick took a very definitive position in the opposite direction. He made a very definitive claim and then provided no evidence at all to support his assertion. And the moment I'm talking about is 2 hours and 39 minutes into this stream. And that's a problem for me. You can't just drop a claim like that and not substantiate it. Over 116,000 people have watched that video on Rumble alone. Can I claim that mRNA vaccines never change human DNA? No, it would be trying to prove a negative. And trying to prove that that's a thing that can never happen is going to be difficult. How the mRNA vaccines work is that they allegedly are a phospholipid capsule containing messenger RNA derived from COVID, and it's a part that codes for COVID's spike proteins, an important part of the virus's exterior. The phospholipid capsule merges with phospholipid membranes of, in this case, the human muscle cells, dumping the mRNA into the human cells. The human cells then build proteins using that mRNA as a guide. So your cells build spike proteins, and then the body produces an immune response to those spike proteins. Then later, when a virus arrives, your body already has the antibodies ready to fight it, and they recognise the spike proteins on its exterior. The mRNA from the vaccine should never be able to even get into the cell nucleus, where it would need to be in order to alter DNA. It would need a special marker on the RNA to even get into the nucleus. And even if it did get in there, the presence of a working reverse transcriptase would be required to turn it into DNA, and an integrase would be required to write it into the human genome. So it shouldn't happen. It should not happen unless there is some unexpected chemical interactions taking place. But are there ways it could theoretically happen? It's not impossible. And there is a controversial and contested paper out of MIT that claims to have found evidence of the virus writing its genes into the human genome. Not the vaccine, mind, the virus. And that's one of the big sticking points in trying to prove Nick Rekieta's claim false. And it's also the reason that I eventually chose to get vaccinated, despite having concerns from the shorter than usual testing that the vaccine received. The mRNA vaccine is just part of the total viral genome of COVID. If the mRNA vaccines can get written into the human genome, what would stop the virus, which contains the same code and more, from doing the same? Likewise, if the spike protein is toxic or dangerous in any way, that will get made by the vaccine, it will also get made, and probably in much larger amounts, by the virus. So in the end, I made my choice, because although the vaccine carried risk, the the risks from the virus logically appeared to be magnitudes higher. Trying to prove that the vaccine never alters human DNA would mean checking every cell of every person who's ever taken the vaccine, and then trying to rule out that any changes in the human DNA also didn't come from exposure to the virus instead of the vaccine. So it's incumbent on the person making the claims to substantiate them. Mr. Rekieta's positions lack even internal consistency, because during this same stream he says that he has no problems with other vaccines. He says after he got COVID, he went to a doctor and asked for ivermectin and antibodies.
I'm full of vaccines. I got all kinds of vaccines. Not COVID, not the flu. Those are bullshit. TB, polio, MMRs, whatever, I'm fine with them. When I got COVID, the first thing I asked was, can I get some of them sweet antibodies pumped into me? And they said no. And it's like, can I get ivermectin then?
He hints at some sort of international conspiracy to create this vaccine in order to change human DNA. Again, he doesn't provide a scrap of proof of this being true. He also doesn't specify any kind of logical motive, or why, for instance, every world government would be fine with this. Why AstraZeneca would be fine with this when they don't even have an mRNA vaccine and instead have a directly competing product. Why no scientist would speak out on it when proving this to be true would probably win them a Nobel Prize. And if, as a person, you believe this to be true, and you think that the vaccine is intentionally made with malign effects, why the hell would you go to a doctor and ask for ivermectin and antibodies that are coming from the same companies? Why would you assume that there's nothing in them that would change your DNA? Why do you believe in other vaccines but not this one? This is crazy talk. It's delusional. Nick says that what he's saying is not misinformation. It's, according to him, free speech.
Real. It doesn't exist. It's not a thing. Because you forming an opinion about a subject and stating it, even if you're wrong, is not misinformation or disinformation.
But it does seem to literally fit the definition of misinformation, taking misinformation to mean false or inaccurate information, especially that which is deliberately intended to deceive. So should someone be able to say these things? Yes or no? Well, it is vital that people can speak against an established narrative. That's important. But before you do, maybe do your research beforehand, especially if you're going to encourage people to not get vaccinated. If you're irresponsible with how you act, misinformation can get people killed. If you're going to tell people to not take the TB vaccine, for instance, you better be sure, because tuberculosis is no joke. Instead, he just bombastically declares that the flu vaccine is bullshit. The COVID vaccines are bullshit, according to him. Again, not a shred of evidence given. You should be able to say these things, but that doesn't mean you should say them. And if you do, be confident that you've done your research first. Be confident that you know what you're talking about, and maybe don't drink half a bottle of whiskey and make definitive claims on the basis of no presented evidence, because it's irresponsible. Nick seems to be broadly against the idea of swatting, and I agree with him on that. It can't be nice to be on the receiving end of it. He doesn't consider that to be free speech, because you're in an indirect way creating potential harm for someone else. But I can't draw much of a line between that and what he's done here. Maybe the intent's different, but the results could be as bad or worse. So you don't fall into the same pitfall as Mr. Rekieta has done here. How do you read scientific literature, for any of you watching that want to? Sadly, it's not as easy as going online and searching for what you want to prove, and that is what a lot of people do. The media do it a lot. Just go to Google and type scientific paper that proves X, because that's just kind of confirmation bias. You'll probably find at least one paper that supports what you want to say. Sadly though, academic research is not exactly nicely collated for public consumption. If you want the settled science, you normally have to go to a textbook. In terms of research papers, think of a scientific debate in journals like a tennis match for a moment. If you search for Djokovic drives down the line, and that's all you watch of a game, those few seconds, you don't know if the shot was returned, you don't know if he won the point or even the match. And that's kind of the same as what you're doing if you just believe one paper in isolation. Bad papers will tend to get retracted, but the overwhelming weight of evidence could point in an entirely different direction. And you won't know that from reading one paper. You have to read more broadly around the subject.
Could you make me a cup of tea, please, Stephanie?